At 11:47 p.m., Daniel realized that the most important decision of his life wouldn't happen in a boardroom or a dramatic moment. It would happen alone, in the quiet glow of his phone screen. By sunrise, nothing around him would look the same, even though the world itself hadn't moved an inch. Daniel Harper was 36 years old, which felt like an age that carried invisible expectations. Not young enough to figure things out, not old enough to stop trying. He lived in a modest apartment outside Denver, worked as a project manager for a logistics company, and followed a routine so consistent it felt rehearsed. Wake up at 6:30, coffee, black, always. Traffic, emails, meetings that sounded important but changed very little. Dinner alone or with coworkers, sleep, repeat. From the outside, Daniel's life looked stable. Respectable job, steady income, no obvious chaos. People often told him he was doing well, and he nodded because that's what you're supposed to do. But stability can be deceptive. Inside Daniel's mind lived a quiet pressure, the kind that doesn't scream but never fully leaves. It whispered questions during long drives and late nights. Is this really it? Is this what you chose or what you settled for? Years earlier, Daniel had wanted something different. He had studied design in college, dreaming of creating things that mattered. Posters, branding, stories told through images. But dreams don't pay rent, and fear is persuasive when it talks about responsibility. So Daniel chose the safer road, or maybe the road chose him. He told himself it was temporary, a few years, he thought, just until things felt secure. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when no one interrupts it. The worst part wasn't the job itself. It was the feeling of drifting while appearing anchored. Every Sunday night, Daniel felt the same dull heaviness, like his life was running on autopilot and he was just watching from the passenger seat. Then there was the email. It arrived earlier that evening, unnoticed at first, buried between status updates and automated reminders. It was from a former college friend named Lucas, someone Daniel hadn't spoken to in almost a decade. The subject line was simple: "I thought of you." Daniel almost didn't open it. The email was short. Lucas explained that he had started a small creative agency on the West Coast. Nothing flashy, nothing guaranteed, but they had a potential long-term contract, and he needed someone he trusted. Someone with Daniel's eye for detail and calm under pressure. "I can't promise security," Lucas wrote, "but I can promise meaning. I thought you deserved to know the option existed." Attached was a proposal, a chance to join, not as an employee, but as a partner. Lower pay at first, uncertain future, a completely different life. Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't the kind of choice movies make dramatic. There was no countdown clock, no dramatic music, just a quiet moment where two paths stood side by side. On one side, his current life, predictable, safe, emotionally numb but financially stable, a life that wouldn't surprise him anymore. On the other, risk, fear, possibility, a return to something he once loved but had learned to bury under realistic thinking. Daniel felt his chest tighten, not with excitement, but with fear. Real fear, the kind that shows you exactly what you might lose. He thought about rent, health insurance, what people would say, how his parents might worry, how friends might call it irresponsible. He also thought about waking up 10 years later, still asking the same questions, still telling himself he was lucky, still wondering what would have happened if he'd been braver for one night. At 11:47 p.m., Daniel stood in his kitchen, phone in hand. The apartment's silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. He realized something unsettling. Not choosing was also a choice, and it was one he'd been making for years. With a slow breath, Daniel typed a reply. He reread it 3 times. His hands shook slightly, not from excitement, but from stepping into the unknown. He pressed send. At that moment, nothing physically changed. The walls stayed the same. The clock kept ticking. But something inside Daniel shifted permanently. The choice had been made. The next morning felt strangely normal and deeply unfamiliar at the same time. Daniel went to work like usual, but everything felt temporary now. Conversations blurred. Meetings felt distant. He carried a secret that made the world look slightly unreal. 2 weeks later, he gave notice. The reactions were predictable. Some coworkers congratulated him, calling him brave, in a tone that suggested they would never do the same. Others warned him, carefully disguising fear as advice. "Are you sure? In this economy? Don't throw away something stable." Daniel nodded through all of it. He understood their concern because it echoed his own thoughts late at night. The first months were hard. Money became something Daniel actively thought about, not just tracked. His days were filled with creative work, but also doubt. Some nights he slept deeply, exhausted but fulfilled. Other nights he stared at the ceiling, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. There were moments of regret, not about leaving, but about how long he had waited. The agency struggled at first. A contract fell through. Another was delayed. Stress replaced comfort, but something else appeared alongside it. Presence. Daniel felt awake. Every decision mattered. Every success felt earned. Every failure taught him something immediate and personal. He wasn't watching his life anymore, he was participating in it. 6 months later, the breakthrough came quietly. A client recommended them to another, then another. Work stabilized, income slowly grew. Not overnight success, just steady proof that the risk hadn't been foolish. More importantly, Daniel noticed a deeper change. He no longer measured his life only by safety. He measured it by alignment, by whether his actions matched who he actually was. The choice hadn't fixed everything. Life was still uncertain, but it was honest now. And honesty, Daniel realized, was less exhausting than pretending. The most powerful decisions rarely feel powerful when they happen. They don't arrive with certainty. They arrive with fear, doubt, and unanswered questions. And that's what makes them real. Daniel learned that waiting for confidence is often a trap. Confidence usually follows action. It doesn't precede it. Growth rarely feels comfortable, and safety can quietly become a cage when it's never questioned. He also learned something more subtle. A life can look successful from the outside and still feel unfinished on the inside. And ignoring that feeling doesn't make it go away. It just teaches it to whisper instead of shout. The choice Daniel made didn't guarantee happiness. It guaranteed responsibility. Responsibility for his time, his values, his direction. And that, he discovered, was enough. Most people don't regret the risks they took. They regret the chances they noticed and quietly walked away from. So here's the question worth sitting with tonight. If a single honest choice could change everything in your life overnight, would you recognize it? And would you be brave enough to choose it?